What's up, Hoop fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Last Shot NBA show here on Little Birdie TV. And as always, we are brought to you by our good friends at topsport.com.au. Now, it's Wednesday morning, and as you know, every Wednesday morning we have a special guest. And today we're going to be talking all things Utah Jazz and, of course, some Joey Ingles, of course. And we have a special guest, Sarah Todd from the Deseret News. Sarah, so good to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm a little bit tired already into the season, but powering through.
Yeah, you know what? I know how that is. Like before I moved over to the US, I always used to hear about it's a long NBA season and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And I didn't really understand it until I got into the thick of things myself. And like by mid-January, I was always like, man, this season's too long.
I know the All-Star break never comes fast enough. I'm always excited I still have to cover usually the All-Star game and that weekend, but having a few days off the All-Star break, it comes February or even sometimes later, and it can't come soon enough. Yeah,
I hear you. But the thing is, though, then after that, you've got to get through those March games before you get into April and the playoffs, and they're the ones that really like drag out the most. Sarah, we've got a lot to talk about today. Excuse me. Obviously, we're going to talk all things Utah Jazz. You've been covering the team for a few seasons now. The one question I've got for you, Sarah, is because I'm a bit of a doubter, all right? Now, the Jazz have been playing fantastic this season. Yes, I know they've got a great record. They also had a great record last year. They had the best record in the Western Conference. They haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs, though. I believe they've had 3 second-round exits, 2 first-round exits in the last 5 years, Sarah. Can you tell me, you've obviously been with this team day in and day out for a few seasons now, what am I missing? Because I just don't think they can get it done this year again.
I don't think that you're necessarily missing anything. That has been the calling card for the Jazz. They're a great regular season team who flames out early in the postseason. And I think that that's due to a couple of things. But before I get to those, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, like, that's kind of how some of the, like, non-dynasty championship teams are made. It's you have to go through those failures. I mean, we have to look no further than last season to the Milwaukee Bucks. Same thing could have been said about them. They were good in the regular season, and then they always struggled in the playoffs until they didn't. And so the same will be said about the Jazz until they don't. I think, and then the reasons I think are very easy to point out for the Jazz. They have been killed by small ball basically every year they've been in the playoffs the last 5 years. And they used this offseason to address some of those issues, and they're working in different ways to attack those switches. And it comes mostly on the offensive end. That's not what people think, because people will look at Rudy Gobert having won 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards at this point, and they say that he gets played off the floor. That's kind of a fun go-to for doubters for the Utah Jazz. But it's not that he gets played off the floor defensively. He's actually incredibly good in space and defending on the perimeter. What happens is that offensively, the Jazz haven't been able to punish a small ball lineup. And so that's what they've been working at a lot this season, is how to actually attack those switches and attack that small ball lineup when it's thrown at them.
I agree to your point that you said, because I mentioned it on our first show of the season as well, and we did a bit of a season preview, and I said the same thing. I said, look, the Jazz, I feel, is like in that situation where they tell you it can't be done until it is done, and I agree 100% with that. How much of a factor, where you mentioned that they're being punished on offense, is that when you look at the squad, like as great as Donovan Mitchell is, I mean, personally, I still don't have him in that sort of superstar category, maybe in that sort of tier below. How much of a factor is that, where they don't really have multiple guys that are on that sort of level offensively?
Well, I think actually offensively, that's not a problem, because they're going to score a ton of points and they have the ability to do that. I mean, when you've got a guy like Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench, who he can easily go off for 20, 30 a night, or Bojan Bogdanovic, who can score 30, 40, depending on the game. And then Conley's a scorer. Donovan Mitchell's a scorer. Rudy Gobert's going to get it done when he's cleaning up stuff and like catching lobs in the pick and roll. So the scoring, I don't think, is the problem as much as it is the defense. And that's where we can criticize Donovan Mitchell, because I think that if you were looking at his scoring and how much he distributes and how much he play makes and creates for the Jazz, that he looks like a star. But he was drafted a lot based on his defensive potential, and he hasn't really lived up to that in the NBA. And then that's another problem in the playoffs, is like the Jazz have relied so much on Rudy Gobert and what he's able to do at the rim that the point of attack and on-ball defense hasn't been good enough. And then, once you break that perimeter, then you got Rudy Gobert trying to guard, 4 or 5 guys at one time. And that's just too much to ask for a single player. And so Donovan stepping it up on the defensive end is like where he needs to take the next leap. And we've seen good signs so far, or early going first third of the season, but that's where the leap needs to be.
You mentioned Jordan Clarkson, and I want to bring up, you wrote a piece, I think it was a couple of days ago, about how he's now sort of added passing to his game. And obviously he won the Sixth Man of the Year award last year, and he's added passing to his game. He's become more of a passer. I want to ask you, what sort of necessitated, that, I guess, aspect of his game to bring that along? He had a really great quote in the piece that you wrote. He said, "I talk to a lot of the opposing coaches and mess around with them, and a lot of them will say, JC, we're not going to let you get off tonight. We're not going to let you score. And sometimes I take some crazy shots and do stuff like that, and it's just me being me. But a lot of teams are forcing me to pass, and I just try to make the play and do what's best for us." So is that the biggest factor in him sort of becoming more of a facilitator?
Yeah, definitely, because, he's always been a score first kind of player. And so it's not been a secret that he can go and get a bucket at any time. But when you kind of have him working in isolation, that's not necessarily a problem. Like if you can stop guys like Donovan or Mike Conley, then you're going to use like your defensive energy to go after that guys rather than Jordan Clarkson. But when he's working within the Jazz's system, he can score a lot more and break down defense and hunt guys a little bit easier. And he's doing it kind of off the catch a lot of times, not so much in isolation. And so in order to break that, opposing coaches have been scouting him a little bit more. And in the same way that they attack Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, they will blitz them often and use 2 guys up on him when he has the ball in his hands. And maybe old Jordan Clarkson would have tried to dribble out of that or slip a screen or something. But now he's becoming kind of like Joe Ingles a little bit, where he sees the blitz coming, and then he's got Rudy or Hassan Whiteside this year rolling to the rim, and he just, passes it up to them, or he kicks it out to the 3-point line when the blitz comes. And so, that's a sneaky weapon when you've got a guy who you're trying to get the ball out of his hands, but when he's getting the ball out of his hands, it's becoming an assist. And so that's a little bit of an added wrinkle for the Jazz this season.
You mentioned also Joey Ingles. We definitely have to ask you, because we all love Joey Ingles down here in Australia. He was also a contender for Sixth Man of the Year last year. He's having another Joe Ingles-like season. Joey just does what Joey does. Should he be starting this season? I believe he's only started 4 games. He's been playing very well. Should he be getting more minutes as a starter, or is he better suited coming off the bench and just sort of, getting that second unit sparked?
Well, it's no secret that he plays better when he starts, but that's such a variable sort of a stat, because when you look at like efficiency and like percentage points, it's also tied to who you're playing with. And when you're playing with the starting lineup, you're playing with better players. And if you're playing more minutes, then you've got more opportunity to score. And so you can't just say like just because he's in the starting unit, he plays better. He just might be having more chances to score. But at the same token, like, Joe is no spring chicken. And so I don't think that there's anyone within the Utah Jazz organization that wants to increase his load during the regular season, because a problem of the last few years, which is another thing that you got to think about this team trying to make that leap from like good regular season team to great postseason team, is that they need to last in the playoffs. And Joe hasn't played well in the playoffs. He's had a few like defensive highlights here and there, but like he slows down, he's a step late, his efficiency numbers go down. And so you're trying to preserve him as much as you can for the postseason in the same way that you're doing with Mike Conley. And so I don't think that he should be starting merely based on the fact that Father Time's undefeated and you got to save those old man legs.
Yes, absolutely. You definitely do. Look, during my time in the NBA, covering the NBA over in the States, obviously I had many interactions with Joey Ingles. He's always good for a bit of a joke and a bit of a laugh. Have you got any stories, funny Joe stories that you can share with us, actually?
I wrote a story a couple of months ago, kind of previewing the season with him. And I was constantly when you're covering Joe Ingles, every city that he goes to, people want to talk about how he's a trash talker. And so he gets asked about it constantly. Like, when did you become this guy? What kind of things are you doing? Are you trying to play mind games? And so I asked Joe, like, hey, are you sick of getting these questions? And he's like, oh, I hate it. It's the most annoying question I've ever been asked. I hate talking about it because trash talk is just a part of the game. And I'm just talking trash as much as anyone else. So that's one piece of it. Well, then you talk to everyone else on his team, people he's played against, and they're like, well, yeah, trash talk is a part of the game, but like not the way that Joe does it. That is a special brand of trash talking that he has. And then the tail end of all that is like Joe constantly jokes or like tongue in cheek will kind of jab at the idea that like he doesn't want to do media. Oh, I don't want to talk to the reporters today. He'll say it in front of them. But then when he sits down, he talks for like 12 minutes.
Yeah.
And he always gives the best answers. And like even when he's annoyed by something, he'll, give you like a 4-paragraph quote about something that was like seemingly an innocuous softball question. And so, and like he's also the guy that like talks the most trash and is constantly loud at practice and is always barking at his teammates. And so the idea that like he doesn't want to answer a question is ridiculous because he loves to talk. He loves to talk about anything. And so when I was asking guys, what makes his trash talk a little bit different, a lot of the things that they said I took back to Joe, and I was like, so here's what they say. They say, you look like an accountant and you're a good basketball player. And so that pisses guys off because they're like, oh, I'm going to go at Joe Ingles. And then you can't. And it's like, I should be able to take this guy. Like, he looks like he's an HR or a substitute teacher. And Joe was like, yeah, I've been hearing that ever since I came to the NBA, that I don't look like a basketball player. And he's like, honestly, they were probably saying it about me in Europe because I just couldn't understand what they were saying. But yeah, I guess like if I don't look like a basketball player, it's fine. Like I'm still scoring on dudes. So like even when he's answering the question, he's talking trash about the other players.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is actually when Joey hits a big shot, 3-point or whatever it is, and he just stares down that opposition bench. I absolutely love that sort of thing. And to your point, I've experienced that as well when I was over there. Like we'd be in a locker room post game or pre game. And he'd do the same thing. Like, I'm not talking to reporters today. And he'd sort of, look at me in my direction, like, obviously knowing that I was Australian as well. But then, you sit down with him post game and he'd always give me as much time as I needed and he really expand on his answers. So, yes, we've got a lot of love for Joey down here. I want to ask you just quickly as well about Rudy Gay and what he's brought to the team, because he's brought that, it seems to me anyway, he's brought that sort of veteran calming influence to the Jazz as well.
Yeah, sort of similar to when Mike Conley joined the team. Which is funny because you got Rudy Gay and Mike Conley, who are both from that sort of original Memphis Grizzlies grit and grind era, and they're very close. And so they both sort of bring that calming veteran presence that is. It sounds like such an NBA cliche, but it really is a thing when you get it from the right guys. And you can see it on the court, especially with Mike Conley when he's sort of orchestrating the offense. He kind of slows things down. But with Rudy, it's more like his decision-making is so deliberate and precise. It's like you can tell that he's been in the NBA for, 15 years. And like nothing surprises him. There's no coverage. There's no player. There's no trick that's going to like get under his skin because he's seen it all at this point. And yesterday after practice, he was talking about the idea of creating longevity in the NBA and how he's had to reinvent himself. And there's a point in your NBA career when you have to sort of, just really be honest with yourself and say like, I used to be the guy, high school, college. I used to be the guy. And that's not the case anymore. And yeah, maybe I feel like I should have the ball in my hands more, or I should be doing more for a team. But if I want to keep getting these contracts, I want to stay a little bit longer. I've got to add to my game. I've got to adapt. I've got to say yes to the coach and whatever he asks. And I think that's really emblematic of the kind of player that he is like, and he did it, and all of his stops, he was doing it in San Antonio, a completely different role than he's ever been asked to play. And he's shooting more threes than he ever has in his career with the Jazz, because that's what he's being asked to do. And he just rolls with all of the punches.
I want to ask you as well. We touched on this briefly before we went to air about the health and safety protocols. A lot of players entering. There was a ton of players entering the health and safety protocols at the moment. The Bulls have had a couple of games delayed because they've got like 3/4 of the team in the protocols. The Jazz have been largely unaffected so far, knock on wood, this season. But that could sort of change as well. I wanted to ask you, in terms of the roster, I mean, the Jazz have got to be happy with what they've got right now, but sort of taking into account that they may lose guys, or, something may happen, do you see them making any changes to the roster heading into the trade deadline come, February?
Yeah, yes, and maybe. They've I think that Joe Ingles is actually an interesting case on this, because if you're looking towards the postseason and also where his contract is, he's on an expiring deal, and the Jazz would want to get him at a bigger discount than he's at right now to keep him around for longer, and I don't know that he would want to go somewhere else. But if they just let him go and like they don't get rid of him, but they don't want to re-sign him, the Jazz are a luxury tax team, and so that's lost money. That's money that you can't make up elsewhere. And so that he's an interesting piece when you think about the trade deadline coming up, because his performance hasn't been all that great in the postseason, especially when you're talking about defensively. And so if they could get a different defensive wing to come in, then it would just depend on the package. It would have to be good, because the Jazz love Joe Ingles. But they also have an open roster spot, and they've got a small trade exception that they got with the Derek Favors trade, and some minor pieces that they can move kind of down at the end of the bench, or they could just pick up somebody off waivers if they wanted to after the trade deadline passes. And so there are a couple moves that will probably be made. I would assume that they would fill that open roster spot before the playoffs come, and I would almost be sure that it would be another sort of defensive-minded wing, just in case something happened like last season when, you get Donovan and Mike Conley injured in the playoffs, and that created a huge problem. They didn't have the wing depth to deal with that. They've got a little bit of a nice pickup that they got with Eric Paschall, but he's not going to be guarding like ones and twos, and so maybe sort of a rangy wing that could play sort of 1 through 3 a little bit easily. That might be someone that they would target. I don't know if they're going to trade someone in order to do that, or if they're just going to fill the open roster spot, but there is a possibility.
Well, honestly, as from an Australian standpoint, I do hope that Joe Ingles sticks around and wins a championship with the Utah Jazz. Sarah, we know you're extremely busy, so we're going to let you go. But before we let you go, we always end the show with some predictions for the upcoming games. We've only got 3 games on the schedule today, so we'll take a quick look at those, and we'll get some predictions. We've got the Knicks and the Warriors. Warriors, huge favorites here, understandably. $1.47. The Knicks are $2.81. The line is at 5. Total's at 2.12. That one's live on ESPN. Steph Curry is going to break the all-time three-point record today, because the Knicks defense is definitely not going to stop him from doing that. I think the whole Warriors, I was going to say Raptors, the whole Warriors squad is just waiting for him to get that record. This is going to be, I'm a Knicks fan, but I said I'm not going to pick them anymore this season because they've broken my heart too much. This is going to be Warriors for me.
Yeah, it's easily Warriors. I mean, if you're ever going to look for a game to watch Steph Curry, I think this would be the one. And it's rife with the potential to be like a really great game, or it could be like an incredible upset. Like, what if Steph like goes through a weird slump tonight, and like his dad is going to be there at MSG watching, everyone in the world is going to be watching to watch him break the 3-point record. And And so I love those kinds of things where it's like, oh, it's going to happen. And so like it either could, and it'd be great for it to happen at Madison Square Garden and just like a beautiful scenario. But it would also make me laugh if it didn't happen because like everyone wants it to.
Yeah, I would, but you know what? I would bet the house that it's going to happen tonight.
Oh yeah,
because...
definitely going for the Warriors.
Next game on the schedule, we've got the Raptors at Nets. Oh gee, I've got the Knicks on my mind. Raptors at Nets. Nets big favorites, $1.47. Raptors 282. Line is also at 5. The total's at 216.5. Live on NBA League Pass. The Nets are just 8-5 at the Barclays, and the Raptors are 7-5 on the road. But I'm going with the Nets comfortably at home in this one.
That one's a little touchy because Kevin Durant might not play in that game.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. I haven't seen that news.
Kevin Durant might not be playing. They've got a lot of guys that are in the COVID protocol. They're also without Joe Harris. And there's a lot of things that are a little bit temperamental in that game. And, you know, Toronto's looking for wins wherever they can pick them up. And so if there's a chance that Durant's not going to play, I might bet the under on that one.
Yeah, look, I didn't know about the Durant news. So if Durant doesn't play, yes, then I would probably lean towards Toronto because they have won 2 in a row and they've got a good record away from home too. Last game on the schedule today, the Suns at the Trailblazers. Suns $1.86, Portland 202. The line is at 1.5 and the total is at 219.5. Live on ESPN, the Blazers are a mess right now. They've lost 5 in a row, lost to the Wolves the other day. CJ McCollum and Cody Zeller both out for this game. Blazers have not won since McCollum started missing games with that right lung pneumothorax. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Right.
The Suns have been fantastic this season. Like I said, Trailblazers are a mess, so Suns for me.
Yeah, I think the Suns are going to be without a couple of players too. I know that Ayton is. He's either sick, non-COVID, or he's in the COVID protocol. I know that he's under the weather one way or another. They've got a couple of guys that are out, but like you said, the Blazers are an absolute mess. And so and the Suns are great even if they're down a couple of players. And so I wouldn't pick the Blazers to win many games. No,
they're an absolute dumpster fire at the moment. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We're going to hope to have you on later on the season as well as we get closer to the playoffs. And hopefully Joey Ingles is still on the squad so we can talk a little bit more about him. Thank you so much once again. This has been the Last Shot NBA show here on Little Birdie TV, brought to you by our good friends at topsport.com.au. And we'll see you guys again on Friday with old mate BK.